Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. I got the title of Best Cop when I worked at our local police department. I was new to this department. All the other officers were old-timers and largely adhered to their customs. They were a great group of guys, and they all tried their best to help me settle in, but they all preferred to act the old ways. I used to take a couple of case files home with me and work on them in my spare time. I took a criminology course offered by a public college 40 miles south of us. I used the new methods I was learning to get back to those old cases. As luck would have it, in the first 6 months of my service, I solved 4 unsolved cases. It was a positive moment. The downside was that Stella spent 2 evenings a week away from me while I was in class, but she was a very caring wife. She knew that what I was learning now would pay off handsomely in the future. She was a nurse at our local hospital. She was able to change her schedule to maximize our time together. We both came from middle-class families. We have already thought everything out about our future. We'll buy a house with a small plot of land to do gardening, get horses and maybe some other cattle. We're going to have 2 or 3 children, but that's going to happen after we've spent a few years together, just the 2 of us. It was a great plan. It was our dream. In short, these 4 unsolved cases that I solved brought me to the attention of Sheriff Jim Stevenson. I found myself sitting in his office and listening to an amazing sentence. He wanted me to work with his investigation team. For all intents and purposes, I would be a detective. The disadvantage was that I would have to report to his office, located in the center of the county. Instead of an 11-mile round trip to work, I'll have to drive 27 miles. The plus was more money and my own patrol car, which I had to take home every night. I was also allowed to ride it to criminology classes. The crucial point was that they said they would pay me for the time I spent in class and pay for my tuition. Needless to say, as much as I hated leaving all my colleagues and friends in the local police force, the sheriff made me an offer that I couldn't refuse. The atmosphere in the district center could only be described as competitive. There was no doubt that my rapid rise had angered at least a few of my colleagues. I tried to keep a low profile, working harder than ever. Most of my time was spent researching unsolved cases. As before, I continued to work on these cases at home. I usually read everything our office has available on a specific case, memorizing as much as possible. Then, when I had a little time or when a thought occurred to me, I would enter it into my proof application. At the end of the day, I transferred my thoughts to a USB drive to take it with me to work the next day. It was this routine that led to everything changing. It started on Wednesday morning when I couldn't find my USB stick. I've been looking everywhere. No flash drive. I was sure I had left it on my desk, but there was nothing there. And then it dawned on me. She was probably accidentally pushed off the table and fell into the trash can. The trash can was empty. Then I remembered that Stella took out a white plastic bag with garbage in the trash last night. She had already left for work, so I had to rummage through the trash to find my missing USB stick. I started the painstaking work of parsing the packages. Finally, 3 rows deep, I found a white bag inside a black bag. What the hell? Why did she put one into the other? Why not just throw the bag on top? The good news is that my flash drive was there. The bad news is that there was something else. That sunny Wednesday morning, that turning point day became one of the darkest days of my life. After I put the flash drive in my pocket, I noticed a transparent sandwich bag at the bottom. In the sandwich bag, I found 6 small bags, better known as condoms. All of them were filled with an easily recognizable white substance. You don't have to be a detective to realize that this was an important piece of evidence. No laboratory is required to identify the white matter. It doesn't take long for a trusting husband to realize that his marriage and life as he knows it are probably over. I opened my patrol car and put a bag of condoms in the evidence cooler. Then I started thinking about my next move. My first instinct was to confront her immediately, but Stella could just deny everything. She could say, for example, that the neighborhood boys probably used our trash can for nefarious purposes. I quickly determined that I would need to use a more reliable method. I need to use professional surveillance equipment located in the house. This will allow me to determine if it was a one-off or an ongoing affair. I wasn't even sure if romance was the right word. With 6 full condoms, would orgy be a more appropriate word? Installing the appropriate equipment will allow me to determine not only the situation, but perhaps also the participants. I can do a DNA analysis of the contents of the condoms if necessary. I was making a list of what I would need to do when my phone rang. Deputy Jake Robbins, It was the boss, Sheriff Stevenson, who called to inform me of a possible breakthrough in one of our unsolved cases. He told me that Luke found Alice Reynolds' car on his property. Sheriff Stevenson asked me to get there as soon as possible. He stated that he was putting me in charge of this newly opened cold case, which had suddenly become hot. It was the first time in 2 years of my new job that I became the lead investigator on a case. It was an honor for me that the boss chose me to handle such a complex and well-known case. As I headed to the ranch, my thoughts about condoms were replaced by memories of the day Luke called me out of the blue. He wanted to discuss the murder of Holly Sherman, which was another one of our unsolved cases. I made an appointment with him at a later date on the same day. It turned out to be very successful. He stunned me with his first sentence. He reported that he was involved in a 4-way affair with Holly Sherman at her house. I had to be careful. Sexual activity, no matter how depraved it may be, is usually not a crime. I asked him if it was by her consent. He said that at first she was a willing participant, but as events unfolded, she became less active. Having said that, he assured me that she never asked them to stop or even pause. Over time, she just lost her enthusiasm. He went on to say that it bothered him so much that he eventually confessed everything to his brother, who was a minister at the local church. His brother advised him to find me and tell me everything. I told him I appreciated the information, but nothing he confessed to was illegal, as long as she wasn't forced to make love against her will. It was then that he told me that the other 2 members were Stephen Barber and Bill Raymore. Both Luke and Bill were there at Stephen's invitation. I thought it was a little strange that Stephen, who was considered Holly's boyfriend, initiated such an act, but it wasn't a crime either. I needed to get to the bottom of the situation, so I asked Luke if he was involved in poisoning Holly. He said he would never do that. I asked him if he suspected that other participants might have been involved in her murder. He stated that he had no reason to think so. At that moment, I decided that all this was just an attempt by Luke to clear his conscience and would not have much effect on our unsolved case. So it was an interesting conversation, but it hasn't helped us figure out Holly's murder yet. I questioned Stephen, Holly's boyfriend, at the very beginning of the case and expelled him. I also understood that although Luke was worried about what had happened, he didn't become a suspect because of it. All I had to check was the other participant, Bill Raymore. I made a note to check it out the next day. I've done a thorough check on Mr. Raymore. Apart from some evidence that he wasn't a good guy, there was nothing to accuse him of murder. Then I started checking on his wife, Ellie Raymore, and I found a clue. Before they moved here a year ago, she worked for a chemical company on the Gulf Coast. After several phone conversations with managers and bosses at the factory where she worked, I had a suspect. She had access to the very chemical that the medical examiner identified as the cause of Holly's death. The managers of the chemical plant said that although they were closely monitoring products that could be used for recreational purposes, they were not as concerned about toxic byproducts as the one I was asking about. Just 3 days after my visit to Luke, I was part of the team sent to get Ellie Raymore. We came prepared with a search warrant for her house. She met us at the door. When I showed my badge and told her that we were accusing her of murdering Holly Sherman, she surprised us all. "I was wondering when you assholes would figure it out," she smirked. "Just let me say this smug cheater deserved what she got. So, thanks to my visit to Luke Young, we unfreezed the case. Most of the credit went to me, but it actually belonged to Luke. And now I'm getting ready to talk to Luke again. We are talking about another unsolved case. This is probably the most talked about case we've ever had. The thing is, an elderly woman named Alice Reynolds and a young man named Jerry Gibson disappeared on the same evening. She was his teacher in a special program designed to teach mentally retarded young people how to handle the responsibilities of a man in the house. Her teaching took place in the residence she shared with her husband, Alan. At that time, there were many rumors that the student and his teacher disappeared on the same day. Did they have a romantic relationship? Did they go somewhere to be together, or was it just a super weird coincidence? These questions were never answered, and the case was soon closed. Today may mark a new start in solving this mystery. Wouldn't it be great if Luke could contribute to this case, as he did in the case of Holly Sherman? If so, we should consider enrolling him in the staff. As I drove up to Luke's house, the forensics cars pulled up from the other side. Luke came out to meet us. When we shook hands, the head of the forensics team asked if it was easy to get to the car. Luke told them where it was hidden in plain sight. He reminded us that the multi-car dealership he was currently running had been owned by the family for many years. Until the recent expansion, it was the Ford agency. They've exchanged a lot of cars over the years. They sold some of their used cars and sent some to auction, but many of them ended up in a car cemetery in the middle of their ranch. Quite often, collectors went out to look at these cars. It was one of those collectors who noticed the almost new car that was among all these classic cars. He asked how much they were asking for this 2-year-old white Buick. Luke went to take a look. The doors were locked, but the license plates were in place. He quickly called, asked a question, and was amazed by the answer. He made another call to the sheriff. After listening to Luke's story, we followed him to the car. 10 minutes after we got to the car, the forensics team opened the doors and trunk. They found a couple of empty drink cups in the holders, but there didn't seem to be much evidence in the car. There was no blood or other significant findings. The most important thing is that there were no bodies there. I asked Luke to think of a place on the ranch where the bodies could be hidden. He searched his memory for a couple of minutes. Then his eyes lit up when he remembered that there was an old well dug by hand nearby. Forensics soon determined that the water depth in the well was at least 12 feet. They hung the camera in the well. The cameraman studied the picture through an optical sight. After a few minutes of analysis, he turned to us and said, "We have 2 bodies there." I immediately called the boss with the news. He congratulated us and said he would make some calls. He needed to assemble a team to collect the bodies. I hope they will be in place by tomorrow. He told me to come to the ranch at dawn tomorrow. The team will report to me as soon as they arrive. I thanked him for trusting me. The crime scene tape was wrapped around the well and the car before we left for home. I was looking forward to a very busy day tomorrow, but soon my thoughts returned to the 6 condoms. Since my duties for today were completed, I had 2 extra hours to go shopping. On the way home, I stopped at an electronics store. I bought 4 smoke detectors equipped with audio-video. They looked exactly the same as the ones installed in our house. I also had a base station to record readings from these devices. I arrived home more than an hour before Stella was supposed to return, and all the devices were already in place when she arrived. I will soon find out the answer to the riddle of the 6 condoms. It could be nothing, or it could be the end of my marriage. When Stella returned home, I hid my concern about condoms by telling her that I had been appointed lead detective in a newly opened case in which a teacher and her student disappeared at the same time. Stella seemed very interested in everything that was going on at the ranch. I've been watching her closely all evening, but I didn't see anything unusual in her behavior. She was relaxed, happy, and loving. She showed no signs of guilt or remorse. I spent several hours that evening refreshing my memory of Alice and Jerry's case. I always suspected that they had a relationship. When I was reading the case file, I found a note from the school administrator mentioning that Jerry had asked Alice to help him with issues related to dating girls. I immediately realized that he had led her into dangerous territory. After digesting every piece of evidence in the file, I came to the conclusion that Alice finally realized that she was too deeply involved with Jerry. He turned the teacher-student relationship into a relationship. It became a danger to her entire family if it ever became known. She knew what she had to do, and she did it. When it was time to go to bed, I was determined to make love to Stella. I needed to see how she would react to me. It turned out that she didn't really like it. Her thoughts seemed to be somewhere else. She made the right sounds and said the right words, but her body spoke differently. Her actions confirmed my suspicions. But now there were hidden devices that would tell the whole story. When I think about it, it seemed like her ardor had been decreasing for a month or so. So far, I have not attached much importance to this. These condoms put me on high alert. I decided to make this a double night. We haven't gone there twice lately, but I wanted to see if she would turn me down. She didn't do it, but her participation in that second event was even more sluggish than her first performance. We usually enjoyed at least 15 minutes of afterglow, but this time after I shot my pack a second time, I just walked out, jumped out of bed and headed to the bathroom. Back in bed, I turned my back on her. She reached out to me, but I didn't answer. I spent Thursday watching the assembled team pick up the bodies, which they took to the lab to complete the identification process. We have discussed this and all other aspects of the case. It's finally over. That evening, I returned home about an hour later, as I had to file several reports and take part in a preliminary press briefing. The boss gave me a day off as a reward for solving the case. When I returned home that evening, I explained to Stella what I had been doing all day, but did not tell her about the extra day off. I intended to take it tomorrow and use it to work on solving a case that was taking place in my own home. When it was time to go to bed, I tried to pick up where we left off last night. To my surprise, Stella asked off, saying she was not in the mood. It made the wheels spin in my head. Was she in a bad mood because she was already sated after another orgy this morning? Will I find another pack of condoms? The morning after Stella left, I made another foray into the trash. Not a single condom this time. Next, I began to look at what happened in our house yesterday, that is, on Thursday. There was a short recording made by a device in the living room, and a longer one made by a similar device in the guest bedroom. I sat down and watched my marriage crumble. The video began with a drawing room showing. The first thing that aroused interest was when Stella opened the door a little after 1 o'clock in the afternoon. She let a couple of guys in, kissing them when they came in. I was able to identify the guys right away. They visited us in the summer. Then she introduced them to me and we spent some time in a casual conversation. Later, she took them for a swim in our pool. That week, when I was arrested, I received several cuts on my arms and chest, and some wounds were bandaged. I didn't want to wet the bandages or risk catching an infection, so I stayed inside and watched some sports on TV. I did not attach much importance to them and, of course, did not suspect any tricks. After all, these two guys were her cousins. Returning to the living room, it had only been a few minutes of conversation when I heard them talking about their swim in our pool, the very thing that I was remembering. Stella remembered that they had carefully hidden in the part of the pool that was not visible from the windows. Then she remembered that she needed to take her morning pill to make sure she wouldn't get pregnant. As I said, I didn't suspect anything when it happened. It was hard for me to focus on this episode. Has it just started in our pool or have they done it before? Did they meet when Stella and I were married? Something just doesn't fit in my head. Not that it matters. They are 3 consenting adults, except that my wife was among them. Their conversations revealed some additional information of interest. The cousins studied at a public university about 50 miles away. After I heard them mention it, I remembered how they talked about it when they were here. None of them had classes on Tuesday or Thursday afternoon. This explains several things. First of all, I now understand why Stella suddenly changed her work schedule this fall. She used to work 4 10-hour days, from Monday to Thursday. She switched to 3 10-hour days, which fell on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Then she had 2 5-hour days, which fell on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. She said that the changes were introduced by the management, but I suspect that all this was done at her request. She was home by noon on the days when her cousins visited her. That explained a lot. I thought the conversation in the living room was bad until I saw what happened in the guest bedroom. I'm not sure if orgy is a strong enough word to describe what I saw. First, they helped each other undress. Then they began an intense foreplay on the bed. One of them pulled out a handful of condoms. I was surprised when Stella said, "Today I have good news for you guys. I've been taking the pills for 10 days now. It's safe for us to ride bareback now. I'm sure we'll all enjoy it without that layer of rubber between us." One of the cousins noticed that, in his opinion, she was trying to have children. She said, "Jake and I are officially trying to get me pregnant, but I postponed it for obvious reasons. Is Jake okay with this? How can he mind if he doesn't know? He would be furious if he found out that I was taking pills. If he found out, it would lead to some questions that I'm not ready to answer. I don't think I could live without what the 3 of us are doing, but I also don't want to lose Jake in my marriage. That way, what he doesn't know won't hurt him." She continued to bemoan the fact that I seemed to notice a difference in her behavior. She mentioned that the last time we made love, when we were done, I just headed straight to the bathroom. The time we used to spend in the afterglow of love has disappeared. She further mentioned that she avoided the marital bed on Tuesdays and Thursdays, claiming that she was not in the mood. It was true. First of all, she was already completely full, but she also didn't want to risk me noticing something that she somehow couldn't hide. She admitted that I was obviously upset by her refusals. She never turned me down before she started participating in these cousin meetings. Then she mentioned that I hadn't even tried to initiate anything lately. She said it bothered her. There was a lot of bed activity in this video. They did everything imaginable. I'm far from being an expert in this act, so I cannot give names to these variations. I can only say that in the first version she was in the doggy position. My view was somewhat blocked by their bodies, but judging by their facial expressions and voice, they were enjoying themselves immensely. They seemed to like it even more. In both of these positions, the men could move quite vigorously. Sometimes the guy standing in front of her even managed to kiss her. Obviously, she liked these poses the most, The third position was used less frequently. At first, it seemed more difficult. She held their shoulders and tried to move up and down while they squatted and straightened up. These efforts led to the sliding penetration they sought. It may not have been their favorite way, but they didn't avoid it. I have to admit that they are experts in all these methods. There was very little conversation when they made love in earnest. One would have thought that watching these many copulations in this video would be the main event that led to the end of my marriage, and this certainly played a big role. But it was the subsequent conversation that finally determined the fate of my marriage. Some of the things she said drove nails into the coffin lid. After watching the video, I called the divorce lawyer. I managed to make an appointment on Monday afternoon. I've been avoiding Stella in every possible way all weekend. She made several attempts to interest me in the betting plan, but I did not give in. There were no kisses, no hugs, no private conversations. I'm done trying to save a failed marriage. Finally, she decided to take the bull by the horns. She said those 5 ominous words, "Honey, we need to talk." I was ready. She started by saying that she knew something was wrong. I didn't kiss her anymore, let alone make love to her. What did I do? You seem to feel guilty about something, I replied. I feel guilty for turning you away from me, but how can I feel guilty if I don't know what I'm guilty of? She retorted. Well, think about everything you've been doing in, say, the last few months. If you can identify something that might be bothering me, we'll talk about it. If you can't think of anything like that, then it must be my fault. Answer me this, Jake. Is something bothering you? Did I mention anything, Stella? Did I say anything that made you think something was bothering me? No, but that's what you didn't say, and your actions tell me that something is wrong, she sobbed. My God, woman, you just admitted that I didn't say anything to indicate that something was wrong. I asked you to search your mind for something you did that might bother me, but you didn't come up with anything. It seems to me that we are in some kind of crazy confrontation. With that, I left the room and she continued to sob. We just continued to coexist in the same house until we went to work on Monday. That day, I took an extended lunch break to talk to my lawyer. I took the video and my evidence with me. After watching the video, he said that everything was clear. Our state allows you to file an application for adultery. The video, without any doubt, proves adultery, he said. He took the condoms from my evidence cooler and asked his assistant to take them to the lab. This will give us even more evidence. He indicated that the settlement would be a piece of cake. He said the documents would be ready by Wednesday. It was decided that I would personally serve her at home. As much as I hated what she was doing, I would not have enjoyed humiliating her at work. I thanked him and left. I probably should have been happy to get rid of this cheater, but that wasn't how I felt. I felt betrayed, confused. I loved Stella with all my heart, but I will never be able to forget the words she said on that video. When I got home on Monday evening, Stella was as nervous as a cheater in church. She apologized for not eating anything for dinner. I just grabbed my phone and ordered a pizza. She said, I'm sorry, Jake, I'm just so upset. I barely did my job today. I'm just a wreck. Please forgive me for everything I've done to upset you so much. We talked about it, Stella. As far as I remember, you can't think of anything that would bother me, and you don't remember me complaining about anything. I think there's nothing to discuss. But Jake, you treat me like shit. Please tell me why. When have I ever mistreated you in any way? You don't touch me anymore. It's like you don't love me and you don't want to make love to me. I have a different impression, Stella. I remember taking steps and being stopped when you told me you were not in the mood. It happened last Tuesday, the Thursday before that, and the Tuesday before that. Maybe you can't handle these 5-hour workdays. I would expect you to rest and you can't wait to make love. But what do I see? The only thing I know is that you've never told me before that you weren't in the mood during our marriage, until you started working 5 hours a day. Now let's move on to your 10-hour workdays. You let me make love to you, but you're somewhere else. It was all one-sided. It was more like you were doing your duty instead of participating in the ultimate act of love. I don't want either of those things anymore, so I just avoid it. I don't want to risk you hurting and humiliating me anymore. What are you talking about, Jake? Are you done with our marriage? Are you done with me? Are you going to leave me? It all depends on you, Stella. It all depends on you. How can I do anything if you don't give me a chance? You treat me like a roommate, not like a wife. She began to sob. I turned around, walked over to my chair, and started watching a news program on PBS. She was sitting in her chair and watching with me. Her phone rang. She said, Honey, I have to answer this. She went into our bedroom and closed the door. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I knew that everything was being recorded by my modified smoke detectors. I connected to the base station using my laptop, grabbed my headphones and started listening to her conversation in real time. She was talking to her cousins. They confirmed that they both heard her and that no one else was there. She said, "I have to cancel this. Jake is acting very strangely. I do not know what he knows, but he knows something. Are you sure he knows? Maybe he just suspects something. It doesn't matter. Anyway, he cut me out of his life. We're just roommates, not husband and wife. He doesn't touch me anymore. I need to change this. Good. We'll skip tomorrow. Maybe everything will be fine by Thursday." You don't understand what I'm talking about. I'm not canceling tomorrow, I'm canceling all of this. You know it's not going to work, Stella. You said it yourself. Now you live in two different worlds. You need both of them. I think it is, but one of these worlds is falling apart, and I need to put it back together. That's what I have to do. Everything else is expendable, but not my marriage. Don't show up tomorrow or at any other time unless you call in advance. You can visit me at any time, only in the presence of Jake. I have to admit that she seems to be trying to hit the brakes. However, sometimes it's too late to do the right thing. Yes, it is. It's too late. When I returned from lunch on Tuesday, Stella called me. She told me that she was no longer going to leave early on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She told her manager that the new schedule did not suit her, and he changed it back to 4 10-hour days from Monday to Thursday. She just needed me to know that I shouldn't expect her to be home when I get there. I said, "I thought you told me that the management demanded this change. I'm surprised they changed it back at your request, especially so fast." "I was surprised too," she replied. "I thought maybe they understood how upset I was, but they didn't. They said they had been thinking about getting everything back for quite some time. My request only accelerated it. Well, I'm glad that everything worked out. Thanks for letting me know." After we hung up, I began to suspect that this might be a cover for moving the orgy to another place. Maybe that phone call last night was also a setup. I knew what to do. I called her office phone. She answered on the second ring. I could hear Mary and June talking in the background. She was at work, just like she said. I quickly came to my senses and said, "I forgot to ask, do you want me to bring us something to take away tonight?" "That would be great. Thanks for thinking about it." "No problem. See you later." It seems that her lies have turned into truth, as the song says. On the way home, passing by Marcy's gift shop, I noticed a beautiful sign in the window that read, "Avoid even the appearance of indecency." I slowed down to take a closer look. Marcy came over to serve me herself. It was probably because I was in shape. Obviously, she read my badge when she said, "There's a whole story behind this product, Officer Robbins." I told her that I liked it because my boss, Sheriff Stevenson, often emphasized this point in our meetings. I said it would be nice to put him in our conference room. Marcy said, "The lady who sold me these plaques had bought them from me just a few weeks before, and now she was selling them with tears in her eyes." Here's what Marcy told me. The woman who sold the signs was named Janet. She was happily married to Brad. She met Steve at a conference organized by the company she worked for. Steve was an Army captain. As it turned out, the two of them had finished working together on a project related to the conference. As their project progressed, they became good friends. They had lunch together every day. When Brad saw them having lunch at the Hilton, he warned her to stop seeing Steve outside the office. She ignored this warning. In fact, they not only continued to have lunch, but even took a couple of day trips together. Soon it began to feel more and more like an emotional romance. After the conference ended and Steve left, Brad was still upset. He initiated a confrontation involving their children. Janet swore that their relationship had never escalated into a physical one and that she had not committed adultery. She didn't know that Brad had hired a private investigator. Brad saw that at least Janet was having an emotional affair. It was most likely adultery. Anyway, Brad couldn't trust her anymore. Ultimately, this led to Brad agreeing to work for his company abroad for a month. He intended to use this month to think about Janet and his marriage. He needed some time alone to digest what he knew and choose the appropriate course of action. Fortunately, their children were both in college. They might be upset if his decision led to a divorce, but they would understand. While Brad was away, Janet happened to pass by a gift shop and saw 4 signs there with a very appropriate message. Avoid even the appearance of indecency. In the deepest corners of her mind, she admitted to herself that although she did not have a physical connection, She may have had an emotional one. If she had followed these wise words, she would have been able to avoid a similar problem in the future. She bought all 4 plaques and placed them in strategic locations at home. One hung on the wall at the foot of her bed. It was the first thing she saw every morning, and the last thing she saw every night. Unfortunately, these signs never became useful. Brad called her a few days before he was supposed to come home. The call was not at all what she expected. Brad's first words to her were, "What are you playing at? While I'm here trying to figure out how to save our marriage, you're still continuing your affair." She said, "What are you talking about? I haven't had any contact with Steve since he left. He was supposed to go to serve in Europe. He's already there." "What a long-distance romance, Brad. There wasn't any romance before, and there certainly isn't any romance now," she sobbed. He replied, "Janet, I may have been born at night, but it wasn't last night. I decided to find out the latest news about your captain before making a final decision about us. I'm surrounded by the military here, and I know some pretty influential officers. I asked a question and they gave me an answer. Your captain didn't go to Europe. He went to Fort Hood. So let's see, it's about an hour's drive from your house. How often does he make this trip? How often do you do this?" She wanted to tell him that she didn't believe what he was telling her, and that she had never gone to Steve's, just like Steve hadn't come. But Brad raised his voice and dominated the conversation. He wouldn't let her interrupt. He said, "Janet, I have accepted a permanent job here. I filed for divorce. I'm asking you to split our assets in half, except for your car and house. You'll get them right now. I don't think you can get a better deal than this. Go to your captain and celebrate tonight. Sign the papers when they arrive." With that, he hung up the phone. After crying for a long time, she called the Fort Hood Human Resources Department. Brad was right. Captain Steve Snow was really there. He's been there for weeks now. Soon she was on her way there, to Steve's. She drove back to the gift shop and sold all 4 signs. She was doing the only thing possible, but there were tears in her eyes. It meant the end of something good that she couldn't protect. On the day the divorce was finalized, Steve's ring replaced Brad's ring on her finger. It was, "Goodbye, Brad, hello, Steve." She insisted on waiting until her marriage was over. Now that Brad had officially disappeared from her life, she resented the fact that he didn't believe her. She could have climbed into bed with him tonight instead of Steve. It was Brad's call, and he did it without giving her a chance. She didn't need a plaque reminding her of how fragile marriage can be. She'll never forget it anyway. She is imbued with this and will do everything possible to protect her second chance at a lasting union. When she finished telling me, I thought Marcy was going to cry. I asked her if there was any story behind all her merchandise. She said it probably was, but she didn't know most of them. I took one of the signs and handed her my credit card with the words, "I'll take this one, Marcy. It will be perfect for our conference room." She pushed my hand away, saying, "Your money is no good here, officer." I shook my head, saying, "I don't want to start by violating the message written on this sign. I'm paying for this, Marcy." She reluctantly accepted my card. When I got home, I put up a sign so that anyone who walks through our front door could see it. "Stella will be here in about an hour." Meanwhile, I connected my computer to the big screen TV in my office. It's time to shine a bright light on the darkness in our marriage. It's time to pull the plug, but first she needs to know what she's lost. When she got home, she saw my patrol car in the driveway. As she flew through the door, she was saying, "Darling, you came home early." She stared at the sign. She seemed to freeze in place. There was concern on her face as she pointed at the sign and asked, "Did you get this for me?" I told her it was my boss's favorite saying. I told her that it applies to me, and yes, it applies to her. Then I asked, "Would you like to have dinner somewhere tonight?" She said it would be good. She just wanted to change out of her work clothes. She asked where we were going, but I told her it was a surprise. I knew this would be our last night together. I booked a table at a steakhouse where I proposed to her. It was a surprise. It's a nice surprise, but it's not the last surprise I'll give her tonight. Yes, she was pleasantly surprised. We talked about how important this place was in our past. It led to memories of so many things that meant so much to us. While our conversation was going on, it was difficult for me to keep a good mood. I knew it was all coming to an end, but she didn't know. She seemed to sense a change in me. She started to look worried. By the time we left for home, she looked scared. When we got home, I suggested watching a movie in the living room. This seemed to reduce her anxiety a little. She put some corn in while I was choosing a movie. We were sitting together on a couch for 2. My computer started streaming video to a large screen TV. In the first scene, the three of them were talking on the bed. They were all naked. She told them how good it had been since they stopped using condoms. My eyes left the video and focused on her. She looked like she was in shock. She kept repeating, "Oh my God. Oh shit. No, 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 not this one. Turn it off. Darling, please stop this." I inserted stop points in several places on the video. I decided to skip the foreplay. At that moment, she rushed to the TV and pulled the plug out of the socket. I know it looks bad. It's bad, but not for you or our marriage. This is not a hoax. Cheating is destructive because the cheater moves away from his spouse. I'm not in love with my cousins. I'm sure deep down you know that there's no danger that I'll leave you for them. It's not even close to love. I'm sure you understand that this doesn't threaten what you and I have. I love you more than ever. I was your wife in every way while this was happening. I screamed, "Is that so? What about all those times when you told me you were not in the mood? You never did that before this whole cousins thing started." I did it out of respect for you, darling. I didn't want to give you any extra seconds. They will never be careless. I took care of that, but I was determined not to give you even a hint. It was out of respect. Are you trying to convince me that the orgies you've been having won't hurt our marriage? Even if I could ignore these perverted, incestuous sexual acts, I can't ignore the words you said. It was what you said afterwards that doomed us. Don't you think that bed is an important part of our marriage? Don't you think I attach great importance to satisfaction? Of course, Jake. I know that bed is a big part of our marriage. I told her that I knew she was lying to me. While she kept telling me how much she loved making love to me, I turned the video back on and pushed it to the last point. It showed a conversation that took place after the bedtime activities. Stella was saying, "You guys ruined me for sleeping with Jake. I try not to screw up and show how uninterested I am in making love to him. Poor Jake. I think he understands that all is not well." I tried to immediately immerse myself in the afterglow. I like the afterglow. It helps me show him how much I love him. He was adamant about another round, so I pretended again. When he emptied his second pack into me, he just got out of bed without experiencing a minute of that afterglow that I've always treasured. I think I need to become a better actress. I'd better go up a notch with him. It will be difficult to portray a strong reaction to such vanilla lovemaking, but I need to do it. If I don't, I could lose Jake. I can't let that happen. Her cousins asked if she was sure I wouldn't be interested in joining them. She said, "I've told you guys over and over again that my husband is not into any fancy stuff. He would never condone what I was doing, let alone participate in it. He must never find out about us. As soon as he finds out, I can say goodbye to my marriage." I turned to Stella and said, "You knew how I felt about weird sex acts, but you did them anyway. For me, our lives have always been an important part of our marriage. So now you're saying that your unorthodox, bizarre, unusual actions have overshadowed and spoiled your enjoyment of sleeping with me. How do you think I can stay in this marriage knowing how you feel about my lovemaking? In the future, every time you deign to make love to me, I will think about what you said. These words will never get out of my head. Well, don't worry about pretending with me anymore. You won't have to." With that, I opened my briefcase and handed her the envelope with the divorce papers. "You've been served. This is a typical, equally divided document covering everything that we have accumulated together. However, you should hire a lawyer to protect your interests. From now on, the discussion should be conducted between lawyers." The movers took all my things while we were having our last supper. So the obstacle known as Jake has now disappeared from your life. I will no longer stand between you and your lovers. I won't disappoint you with a vanilla goodbye kiss. Enjoy your freedom to make love to whomever you want. Goodbye, Stella. Good. When I got to the door, she ran up and grabbed me around the waist with a bearish jerk. She sobbed, "I didn't mean anything by the fact that the bed with you was boring or vanilla. I've already put an end to what I've been doing. It's over, darling. It will never happen again." I kept walking to my car, dragging it along the sidewalk. She wouldn't let go. Our neighbor Sally ran up and asked what was going on. Stella started telling her that we were having a hard time. While they were talking, I took this opportunity to run to my car and drive away. I saw her in the rearview mirror. She was running after my car and waving her arms. I turned the corner and she disappeared from my field of vision and from my life. The epilogue. Stella tried to contact me twice. One day she came to my door and said she had an idea how we could be together again. I said, "Don't waste your time, Stella." She left in tears. The next meeting took place after the divorce became final. I was in my patrol car, stopped at a red light. She turned into the next lane. When she saw that it was me, she waved her hand. I ignored her. When the traffic cleared up a bit, she stepped on the gas and raced through the intersection. The light was still red. I had to stop her and issue a fine. The cop in me wanted to do it, but the ex-husband in me didn't want to be forced to talk to her. The ex-husband won. It was the first anniversary of our final divorce. Kelly and I were sitting by the fireplace, eating popcorn and watching a movie on Netflix. She's a social worker. Our professional paths crossed several times in cases that were within our competence. We got to know each other at a holiday dinner for the poor. When we finished serving dinner to the poor, we, along with the other waiters, sat down to our own dinner. Since we were working together, we decided to eat together. Our conversation was very pleasant and we found that we have a lot in common. This conversation led to dates. Dating led to love. At the moment, we are in an exclusive relationship. After our movie ended, there was a knock on the door. I looked through the peephole and saw a courier with an envelope. I assumed it was a job-related delivery. When I signed for the letter, I saw that it was from Stella. I opened it and started reading. Jake, for the last time, I want to say how sorry I am that I ruined our marriage. When you left, I told you that I was done with episodes with my cousins, and it's true. When you left, I was devastated. I began to sink into despair. I knew I had to come to my senses. My way out of this swamp was to call them and tell them that I was ready to pick up where we left off. They informed me that they had already agreed on something with a cheater named Frida. Then they surprised me by saying that she would be happy if I joined them. They said she was B's girl. Sensing my confusion, they told me that she often crossed the border between the hemispheres. I finally understood. I told them that I had never thought about making love to another woman. I thought about it for a couple of minutes before I said, "What the hell? I'm ready to try anything." Soon, our team consisted of 4 guys and 2 girls. We've had a long season and we've played every game imaginable. I became a switch. I tried both sides of the plate and loved them both. After selling our house, when I moved into an apartment, I began to realize how much I had lost when you left. While I was living in our house, I was able to convince myself that you would eventually walk through that door. When I moved into the apartment, I already knew that you would never come back. I started to lose interest in the team. I began to see it for what it was, absolute depravity. I finally quit the team. In fact, I was fired for not fulfilling my obligations. Anyway, it's over. You know, if I had paid more attention to English lessons, I could have written a book or at least an article about what I learned. First of all, the old saying about nipping everything in the bud is true. I should have stopped it from the very beginning. I should never have allowed such debauchery in our pool. Before that, I was completely satisfied with our bed life. Everything changed in just a few minutes in our pool. A fantasy was born, and it invaded the very center of my consciousness, and it engulfed me. To tell the truth, at that very moment, my ruin became inevitable. I needed more. When I got more, it was never enough. I lied to you when I said I didn't mean what I said to my cousins, those words that bothered you so much. I'm ashamed to admit, but what I told them was the unvarnished truth. I meant every one of those words that you hated. I was deep in the bowels of hell and there was no turning back. My marriage broke up. My life is over. I will never be a wife again. I will never have a child that I can love. No little bundle of joy will ever call me mommy. It's all gone. There is no turning back. The only way out is never to go inside. There is another old saying that applies to us as well. But this is wrong, although they say so. It says, actions speak louder than words. That's bullshit. It wasn't what I did that led to the breakdown of a marriage that couldn't be fixed, but what I said. It was these words, indelibly imprinted in your mind, that determined my fate. We would never have been able to return to normal life as long as those words stood between us. Words matter. I leave everything, both good and bad, and leave. I will never cross your doorstep again. You will never have to look at the cheater that your ex-wife has become again. If I could go back and change everything, I would do it in the blink of an eye. This doesn't happen in real life. I wish you all the best. I hope that if you ever think of me at all, you will only remember the good times. We had it all, Jake, until I destroyed it all. In the process, I destroyed myself. Finally, with great newfound appreciation, respect, and yes, abiding love, I say goodbye to you forever. Stella. Kelly was reading over my shoulder and worried. She turned to me and said, "You know what that is, right?" It's a suicide note. You can't let this happen, darling. I took her hand. I'm completely out of the game and I don't want to come back. As Rhett Butler said, honestly, my dear, I don't give a damn.